Everyone, this is a regularly scheduled council work study session for May 19th, 2015. And please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. We'll get started.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you. We'll start right off with business item 1, approval of Circus Carnival application. Ms. Reinerson, could you tell us about this, please?
Yes, I can. So pursuant to the Port Orchard Municipal Code 5.32.080, it requires council approval for an organization requesting to operate a carnival within the city. So on May 18th, the Paradise Amusement submitted an application requesting to hold a carnival in the South Kitsap Mall parking lot beginning Thursday, May 21st and ending Monday, May 25th. They have paid the required fee and have submitted the city's insurance requirements. Staff has provided received comments from all the department directors, and staff is recommending approval of the carnival.
Okay, thank you. Council, discussion?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I move to ratify the issuance of a carnival license for Paradise Amusements to be held in the South Kitsap Mall parking lot beginning Thursday, May 21st, 2015, and ending Monday, May 25th, 2015.
Thank you. We have a motion,
Second.
and we have a second. Is there any more discussion?
Question. So Brandy, what do we get for revenue from this? What's the application fee and any other potential revenue sources?
It's $100 per day. So 4 days, 4 days, $400.
Seems like in the past, when we've approved these two, they always end up being 11th hour.
Correct.
Wondering if you seem to be the nature of the business and maybe the fee is kind of low. Just a thought.
Is this the same? Were they already in Kitsap? Were they the ones at Silverdale?
I believe they were in Paulsbo last weekend, and the applicant is here in the audience should anybody have any questions for her. But I understand that they were just at Paulsbo. And my understanding, the reason for the late submittal of the application this year is when they were in Paulsbo, they looked at their permits and they looked at their file and everything was good to go. Then they looked at the year and realized it was last year's permit and quickly approached the city and asked that we accommodate them.
We were second choice. They wanted to stay in Paulsville?
No, they were already in Paulsbo for an event and getting ready to move to Port Orchard for the next phase, and they realized that they had last year's permit, not this year's.
Any other? Yes.
Quick question. I don't think their setup will impede transit, but I don't see anything here from the transit buy-off in the email chain.
Correct. The carnival is all taking place on private property. So it's just all at the parking lot of the mall, so there shouldn't be any interference, I don't believe, with transit.
Okay, thank you.
Doesn't one of the buses go by that mall? Right
They
next
goes into the parking lot of the mall.
They do. Okay, we can confirm and make sure we get a comment from Kitsap Transit and relay that to the applicant of making sure that they're clear with the transit.
We're not blocking any driveways.
Okay.
That's what you're asking. The driveways are open.
Okay. We'll double check with Kitsap Transit, make them aware of the carnival.
I just didn't see it in here.
Okay.
Can you tell us a little more, like how many rides, how much space you'll take up, and do you have a specialty?
The footage is about 200 by 180. So just goes within some perimeters and some light poles with the driveways going all around the area. So basically in front of that vacant area, that part of the mall there is where we're going to be setting up, and all the drives throughout, because they have the Goodwill drop off and everything, will be available for people to direct to the mall area.
Any discussion? All right, seeing none. We have a motion to approve the Circus Carnival application. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. The motion carries. Thank you. Okay, we're on to discussion items. City Attorney Communications with Ms. Morris and Ms. Cates. Both of them are here, and we'll... Do you want to just lead into this a little bit with your...
Right, I mean, I didn't have anything prepared, I just wanted to make sure that all the council members knew that you could call me at any time or email me. In the past, what I've done when council members have questions or request opinions is that I do notify the mayor and need a majority of the council members to also desire that, so that I'm not writing opinions for just one council member and spending fees without, the mayor's approval. So if that's the sort of procedure that you'd like to set up, I think that's the way it's worked for me in the past. Other than that, I'm available
Just some questions.
for questions, and call me anytime. We've been doing a lot of ordinances lately to try and update your codes. We have just finished all the transportation benefit ordinances, and you should be seeing those shortly. Tonight, Nick's going to present some transportation impact fee and concurrency ordinances that we've been working on as well. So we're hoping to get all that off the ground and update your codes as soon as possible, because that is a great area of exposure to liability.
Can you email her contact information to each one of us individually so that we have it?
Yeah, sure. I can give you some business cards.
That works too.
Okay.
Can you suggest a way that, let's say I had a question and I can call you, but you can't really work on it until I have maybe 3 others who have the same question. So how does this work in other cities? How do you find out that there are 4 members at least that want that question answered?
Well, what I've done is just call other council members and find out if they're interested.
You would call them? Or?
Yeah, I would just call them up and say, one council member has requested an opinion on this, and I can't go off on my own to do it, or you can bring it up at the next council meeting. But I just had problems in the past, where one council member is asking for opinions over and over. And then the council finds out, and they're like, no, we didn't want to spend fees on that. And of course, the mayor has to be involved too, because he's in charge of the budget.
But if we have just a simple question,
You can call me anytime. Yeah.
okay, and that doesn't need the concurrence of
No, what I was
4 other.
talking about for concurrence is like a written opinion, or something that would, involve.
Require research.
Right,
stuff
right,
like that.
yeah,
Expenditure funds.
right.
How much of your work is it all hourly, or is some of it done under retainer? I don't remember your contract, sorry.
It's all hourly, but.
It is all hourly.
Yeah,
Okay.
but you're getting a great discount because a lot of the things that you're doing, I'm doing for other cities. For instance, the Transportation Benefit District ordinances, I did for 2 other cities, and I just found out yesterday that the entire bill for that is going to be under $500 for you. And there are like 6 different ordinances that you have to create that, and to have budget ordinances, and for the $20 license tab. So it's, it provides you a great discount. Given that, all I do is work for cities. So.
Ms.
I have
Cates, I'm sorry.
Well, I have a question for Sharon.
Yes.
And
Well,
that is,
Sharon. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Go ahead.
well, my question is, because you're the labor personnel attorney, and I know we have some contracts coming up
Right.
later this year. So I'm wondering the procedure and the process we go through with that,
Sure.
and council's involvement.
Absolutely, yeah. We've actually had an initial meeting with the mayor and the department heads to start gathering the information that we need to be prepared for negotiations. We have a tentative plan to get started sooner rather than later. Certainly not before we speak with all of you and get your input and your parameters for what you're looking to accomplish with the contract negotiations. We have to get some ducks in a row first, and we're working on that now. And hopefully we'll be coming to an executive session in the not too distant future to go into all of the details. But if there's something in particular, just like a timeline or that sort of
Yeah, I
thing.
was just kind of interested because I've not been on council when we've had labor
I
negotiations
see
in the
that.
past, and so I was just wanting to understand the process.
Yeah. Well, we work with the city council. Obviously, they're the ones that have to make the final decision on the contracts.
And we work, I work together with the mayor and the department heads to find out what, contract language changes might be needed and that sort of thing, and gather comparable information on other cities, that what they're doing, and get information from you all on where you would like to land amongst all the comparable cities, and what your financial goals are. And so then we get started with the Teamsters by letting them know that or the Teamsters and the Police Guild, to let them know that we're ready to start. And then we start having meetings, and hopefully, it's, from what I understand in the past, it's been roughly 3 to 4 month process. We try to meet fairly regularly to keep it moving. And we would probably make it a point to come speak with you all at least once a month to advise you on what's going on and just keep you updated in the loop. But it's, our hope is that we have the 3 Teamsters contracts are up at the end of September, and the 2 Police Guild ones.
September.
Right, they're up at the end of December. So we'll start with the Teamsters fairly soon and try and get that wrapped up before their contract is expired. And the same with the Police Guild.
Question, have you sent letters to the bargaining units introducing yourself?
I have not yet, but I intend to do that very soon. I want to make sure that we're all on the same page, good to go before I do that. But as soon as I have to go ahead, I'll certainly reach out to them and start talking about when would be good times to get this started. Hopefully very soon. Sometimes summer vacation schedules can get in the way, so we don't want to wait too long. Other than that, I'd just like to say that I'm really glad to get the chance to meet with all of you. I got to meet some of you at the interview, and I really appreciate you taking a chance with me, and hopefully I will be, I will certainly do my best for you, and hopefully I'll do work that you're approved of, that you approve of, and that you are happy with. And I certainly am the same way. If you have any questions for me, please don't hesitate to let me know. Let you know. That's it.
Do you have cards for them?
I do have cards.
Any other questions? We've still got some time here. Any other general questions?
Carol, do you like councils to give you a sense of if they want you to interject, or if they want you to speak only when asked, or?
Well, my experience has been where I just wait till someone asks me a question and put a lot of the information that you need to know, the legal information, in the agenda bill. And I have to say, too, that it sounds like you had a great parliamentarian in Greg Jacoby, and there were very good council meetings that I've attended where I've been asked to do any Robert's Rules of Order issues. So that's rare for me, because a lot of council that I represent are very informal, and if they get to a point where they don't know what they're going to do, they just make a motion to suspend the rules, and they do, what they want. But so you guys are you're very formal.
Yeah, we'd like to know more about that.
That'll be the first motion every night.
So anyway, I just want to let you know that that's where I'm coming from. And what I'm going to try to do is put information in the agenda bill so that will bring you up to speed on a lot of things and reference your code and state law, so that when you come to the council meeting, you're already going to have that. And we won't have to go into a lot of the discussion about the background during the council meeting. I also know that there's changes from the way you had previously done things, and that's going to be a little bit of a disconnect at first. I know we did with regard to annexations, because that annexation procedure that we had when I was still the interim city attorney is totally different from the way I do annexations, because in that procedure, I think you were presented with an annexation petition at the very end of the process, so that you really didn't have any time to make an educated decision. And what I try and do is provide as much upfront time for the council to deliberate as possible, so that when an application comes in, it's presented to you immediately, and not when you're in line, so that you can go out and look at the property and do whatever other, whatever interests you. If you have to go out and visit the property, or educate yourself on the state of the roads, and I think that was one of the issues. But that's going to be my perspective on things, and I do try and do everything up front. And because of my background with regard to the insurance pool, I really have a preventative sort of approach to things, and I try and make sure that everything's done right at the beginning so that we don't end up with a problem at the back end and we're into litigation, because I think that's the way we can keep our budget, in line. If we end up letting things go too far, then we end up with problems, and then everyone wonders what happened when you can actually do everything correctly at the front end. And I have to say I tend to be a little bit more conservative in my opinions as a result of working for the insurance pool, because I've seen, what can happen in so many cities. So that's how I work.
You, of course, are going to get the absolute best deal we've ever gotten. Ever.
Well, I was interested
Don't
in
want
this
to
file.
put words in your mouth or anything.
I know that some attorneys have been accused of being almost the 8th council member because they interject themselves and they put themselves into the discussion. I haven't minded that, even though I thought that sort of comment was amusing. But it seemed to me that you were just a little more, what's the word, sedate or reserved, yeah. So I didn't know if that meant that you had nothing to say or you were actually waiting for someone to look at you or something.
No, I mean, I have to say that in a lot of the councils that I work with, they tell me what they want me to do. And if they want me to be more involved in the process, I can be more involved in the process. If they just want to ask me questions and have me interject at that point in time, then that's what I do. But like I said, what I try and do is make sure that you're prepared before you go to the council meeting, because you don't want to have the city attorney wasting your time while the clock is running and y'all want to get home while I describe all these, legal ins and outs at the council meeting.
So we'll have to figure it out a little bit. In a couple more meetings, we should have a pretty good idea now. The flow and the flow.
Well, yeah, I mean, but if you want me to interject myself more into the process, I can, try and do that. I just have this very, very, how should I say, I don't want to waste everyone's time when I know they all want to get home. So I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about, legal opinions during council meetings, unless you want it.
So, Ms. Capes, when do you suspect we may have an executive session? Just rough.
I was hoping for beginning of June, because I'd like to get started with negotiations by mid-June, but if we can, it depends on when we can fit it into your schedule. But I think
So then you'll be getting hold of Brandy and seeing about the...
Yes.
Okay, good. Yeah, I just assume be ahead of the curve rather than be playing catch up at the end.
So before we go on to this, though, I would like to hear, is that what you want me to do? Do you want me to, introduce things and talk more?
Not necessarily.
What would you like?
I'm not sure we all have the same opinion. I like a little more interaction, but I haven't had any complaints about you not saying anything. It's been a different time.
My opinion is if we start doing something that you clearly understand is illegal or we're heading down that path, let us know.
Oh, yeah, I definitely.
Otherwise, we have 7 council members.
Okay,
So.
okay.
Staff, do you have any questions? I think it's appropriate to have them if you want to talk.
Yeah, no, we've been working with Carol and we had our initial meeting with Sharon, so I think we need to get going on the CBAs as soon as possible. Because I think in the past, John, haven't we already started in June with our first meeting?
Generally.
In HR, Deb Howard did write the union's contact letter and say that the city was interested in getting started and if they had any issues to communicate them back. So there has been a opening introduction.
And we're doing the comparables, and so there's stuff that's going on. But we do need to get moving on actual setting up meetings and looking at calendars and.
Right. And that's what I anticipate happening, you know, no later than next week, is we'll get it on people's calendars and get going.
Anything else? Okay, I just I just came from a meeting to come to this meeting, and I just want to read you. Ta-da! Can we put that up? That's our South Kitsap High School field, all-purpose field. And I would like to read. This is what I went to the meeting at South Kitsap Cedar Heights, and it was a school board. And representatives of South Kitsap School Board announced on May 19th at the school board meeting that this district will receive donations of over $650,000 from 2 local community leaders to assist in funding the replacement of the athletic field, resurfacing of the track. According to Chris Limke, South Kitsap School Board President, Kitsap Bank has committed $504,000 towards the renovation of the South Kitsap School athletic field, while a $150,000 donation from Debbie and Wayne Maycomber will support resurfacing and overspraying the existing track. So, and council, they gave me one copy of what the track's going to look like and their presentation. If you'd like to look at it, ask me afterwards. But anyway, that's very, very good news for South Kitsap and for the community. And this will be an all-purpose, all-year-round field where we've never had it before. We've always had mud all year round. So we're really excited. And by the way, this is a state-of-the-art field, and they tell it there's only like, I think the Dallas Cowboys have this same field, and there's not many other high schools in this U.S. that has this type of field.
A few in Europe, a few down south, and it's the field turf, but it doesn't have the rubberized pellets. It has coconut, ground up coconut husks. So
it's very green. I mean, I don't mean physically green, but you know, ecologically green. It's built to last for a long, long time. Probably have to be resurfaced every 12 years, just the surface grass. But anyway, it's supposed to be real good to reduce injuries too. That's a big.
And it's going to be ready for their first game September 4th or 3rd.
That's what they say. Very ambitious, but that's what they say. So. Anyhow, that was exciting, and I just couldn't wait to tell you, so I told you. So, all right. You have something to do, I'm sure.
I will.
You know, so.
1 or 2 things.
Okay. If there is no more questions, then we'll let you
Okay. I'll get on
be about your business, and thank you so much for coming.
Next meeting as well.
Thank you.
Okay, we're at water quality, funding, storm drainage. Mr. Martin.
Ms. Archer.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. Good evening, members of the council, mayor, and public. The city submitted an application to Ecology last fall to try and get some grant funding to rebuild our decant facility that the city currently has in operation. The city received notification that we have ranked fairly high in the grant standings, and it is looking very promising if we can get through legislation that we will be seeing $761,250 in grant funding, and they are proposing a $253,750 city match in loan funding if we would like to take that. And it's a 75% grant, 25% match. So that's why the breakout goes that way. In your packet, you will see a copy of the proposed plan for what we are proposing for the new facility. This has been approved through Ecology because we did use grant funding to do the design. And it has actually been built in another facility, and that is what the photograph is on the last page for you, is a facility very similar that is in operation as we speak. So based on that, it was put into the capital improvement plan as a $500,000 project, but as we started getting into it to try and make everything compliant with current regulations and everything else, the project did grow And so that's one of the reasons we tried to get as much grant funding as we could to help subsidize that funding gap that we were going to see. And so tonight, we're here to see what you're going to want, because July, we will know for sure. That is when Ecology will start the negotiations for the process for the agreement for what we will take and what we will not take. And so we thought we would bring it to you tonight to see what your pleasure is.
So they're also offering us a low-interest loan.
A low-interest loan.
And what are the terms on that loan?
We asked for it at 20 years, but Alan has done the math, and I'm going to let him speak to that.
The state has offered the 25% match. They've offered a water pollution control revolving fund loan, and it would be at 1.2%. And what we did is we calculated that using a 6-year payback to cash flow it, which would be a payback of $52,000 a year to pay that back. Staff's recommendation is that you consider the loan. The reason for that is a grant is reimbursable. So in other words, as we build the Decant facility, we first pay for the construction, and then it takes 6 to 8 weeks to receive reimbursement back from the state. So if we take the nearly $600,000 that we have in storm drainage and had to roll that money over during the construction phase, you get real tight on, of course, your cash flow issues and that type of thing. That's part of it. The other thing is 1.2%. Actually, if you take the $600,000 that we have in the bank, we do receive some interest off of that. It's not a lot nowadays, but some money is in Kitsap Bank that offsets our banking expenses, which is 0.65%, almost a little over 0.5%. There's a portion of it that's in a money market account at Kitsap Bank that pays nearly 0.5%, and then there's a portion of it in the local government investment pool at the state that pays 0.17%. So less than 0.25%. But if you consider those cash flows, those help to offset your 1.2% loan rate. So you pick up the benefit of having the cash to flow the issue. Also
1.2, I think I said 1.5 the first time.
1.2.
1.2.
I'm sorry. And so that helps offset that. That's a step in the right direction. It also leaves your cash on hand for any type of rainy day expense. Now, if you calculate this out over a period of time, over these 6 years, if the effort is to do as many projects as you can, in other words, leverage your funds, to leave the cash on hand, if the city can get into the position to do the Arnold box culvert, then we could accelerate that and do that project in this same period of time. Inflation is running 1.8% if we go to the most recent. So actually waiting on the culvert for at 150,000 at 1.8 increase, when in fact you can borrow at 1.2%, you actually pick up a benefit to get that project done, rather than to have that project, the $150,000 culvert, go up each year by 1.8%. So that's why we get to option 1 and option 2. And if you'll see in the narrative that Andrea and I put together, option 1 is the pros, which is the borrow the grant money, is the money available for rainy days, the Arnold Creek culvert, and possibly the Rockwell Avenue improvements, and you earn interest on your reserves. The cons are you pay interest on the outstanding loan. As I said, though, it's very low. And then there is some staff loan administrative costs that gets thrown in there.
Did they loan money for some street improvements?
Ecology does it for stormwater because we've been harping a lot on that one.
So you're only recommending borrowing the 253 from this fund,
right,
just for the match. Are there any costs to borrowing the funds? Fixed
Yeah,
costs?
yeah, there was. It's very minimal. I forget what it is.
But didn't they already take the administrative costs out of it, and these are the numbers, so they have,
Yeah.
it's just like the DWSRF, they take the total amount in the budget,
Yeah.
they take their piece out, then they take, here's the grant portion, and so you're fully funded, they've already taken their administrative costs.
Yeah,
They're
they're-
paying it, though. I
they-
think
they
it's clear
can't-
this-
Cost of the borrowing.
Yeah, they fund that in the grant, Comes from the proceeds, kind of like a mortgage.
DWSRF.
Oh, the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund, that's
Okay,
the
I
well,
saw a few people out there. that were
that's
going-
that's the well 10 funding source, which is a 20-year loan.
So option one actually costs you to borrow the grant money about $7,500. If we go to option two, where you actually pay the grant using your own cash, your reserves, you have no borrowing costs in the form of interest. You have no staff loan administration costs, but you do have the lost opportunity cost of the use of that money, and you lower your rainy day funds, which is a concern on cash flowing this out. And so your cost on that one is about $18,000 if you do the math on that way. So the cheaper way is to actually borrow the grant.
I kind of agree with you. I think that sounds best. But the thing I was wondering about is borrowing the money. Does that impact our overall ability citywide to borrow money?
Yeah, I mean, does it go against its debt limit? You have to remember, this is actually going against the utility as such, and it impacts it, but not, I mean, your total voted GO debt's $32 million. And we're talking about $250,000, and you're paying it back at $52,000 a pop. So it really doesn't impact, I think, on the decisions.
Once constructed, are there any revenue opportunities from the decant?
Part of the agreement and part of what's built into this is to actually develop interlocal agreements, because currently the facility is used by 3 separate entities. There's a possibility that a 4th entity will come in. Part of what we have to set up by taking this grant money is a interlocal agreement that sets up a fee structure that helps support this facility and also build in for rebuilding it when it hits its end of life. And so that's what we'll be working on as we move through the grant agreement with Ecology, as well as going to the different entities that participate in this. And each one of them actually wrote a letter of support for the grant, knowing full well that this was what would become of it should we get it. And we will go through and set up that fee structure at that time for them.
And we've talked to the state to make sure that there was no prohibition against charging fees based on any grant provisions, and they've given us an email that said we could move ahead.
Am I remembering that the new facility will allow us to measure or know who's using it? It seems to me that we didn't know that right now.
The new facility, the way that it is designed, puts a tracking mechanism on the gate. So when somebody goes in, it is a separate entry, either a key card or a keypad entry code that will track who's going in, how many times a day, and that's how the fee structure is set up, is based on their trips in through that gate is how they get charged. And then if they want water, the water is built in the same way, because there's actually a water meter that will be put in, and if they want to refill the water on their eductor or Vactor trucks, as they're more commonly known, they would put in their code, it would release the water, and they would pay for the water quantities that they're taking as well.
Right.
Who are the other entities that use our current facility?
West Sound Utility District uses it. Kitsap County does do some decanting once in a while in our area, and we use it.
And the state,
The
DOT
state would be
may,
WashDOT would like to come in and use it because they don't have anything in this area at this time.
So during the budget process, we did talk about this. So obviously, this is after that fact, and you've already stated it is. But is it kind of a crisis thing for us, or is that why we haven't kind of done it in a more budget-wise, conscious?
Most of the work in 2015 is going to be getting the agreement set up. 2016 is where it will all be budgeted, because that's where construction will be occurring.
right, we knew when we were developing the 2015 budget that this was on the horizon. We came to utility committee to say, hey, this is a potential. But until the legislature passed the budget, we really couldn't allocate that budget authority. So as Andrew says, this is really getting feedback, getting the ILAs in place for a 2016 project, which we now will be able to budget.
What I remember, Jerry, is when I first heard about this, we thought it was going to cost $500,000. I mean, that was what everything was moving forward with, was this $500,000, and we thought the grant would be $500,000. But when it's come back, we've realized that the cost is going to be double, but we're getting a much larger grant. And my earlier question to Alan was, isn't the payback of this of the loan, isn't that included in the cash flow in the stormwater rate increase that we just did? So it would, remember when we escalated that from the analysis we got where they had incremental increases and we just went up? And this is a tangible from doing that for our citizens.
This is covered in our capital program.
Yeah.
Right.
The rate structure has this built in.
Andrea, what is the life of the project? You said the life of the project.
Typically, your facilities can run anywhere from probably 30 to 50 years easily.
I mean, this is...
A lot of it depends upon the upkeep, and that's part of what would be built into the fee structure, is to be able to do the upkeep so that we would be able to keep that facility functioning longer.
It's basically just a concrete box that you dump hydrated soils. It leaches out into a trough, and it has a metal structure over it. I mean, there's not a lot of moving parts.
Mm-hmm. So why do we have to have this?
The current facility has gotten us into a little bit of trouble with the health district.
Yeah.
Because we don't have a cover over it, and it does drain to sewer, so it has become more of an inflow and infiltration problem whenever it rains. So you're adding more water to the treatment plant. By creating this facility, you're putting a cover over it, so the rainwater actually sheds out of the area, and it does not add to what we're paying to treat at the treatment plant.
And it's not a contained system that's out there now. So maybe you get a heavy rain and somebody's just dumped 3 or 4 piles of this stuff. It's really not contained at all.
Mm-hmm.
So this new system would allow us to contain that effluent and treat it properly.
Yeah. And we've had a procedure of getting rid of the material as well that requires it drying out and then adding tree limbs to it or bark or whatever. And so it's been, we've had a number of conversations with the health department on the current operation. So I can honestly say this is a required. We either do this or we stop decanting and we go.
I was just going to say that either we do this or we find somewhere else.
Yeah. So we might as well generate some income from other people using our facility.
What I'm hearing, I support the idea of borrowing the funds.
As do I.
That's not for me.
All right, well, that's easy to do. Thank you very much.
Ellen, it's nice to have this kind of a breakdown so you can kind of see the pros and cons of it. Thank you.
Mr. Dorsey, you're warmed up and you're ready to do your presentation?
I'm warmed up. I'm ready to go. Okay, so so the background, as you know, back in May of 2014, the City Council approved the contract with Katie Isaacson Associates. Katie Isaacson just moving up to the door in her Mariners teal. And she started on the 2014 water sewer financial gap analysis. And then at the end of the year, we had our initial presentation, and it was, council asked that Katie continue into 2015. And so at this point, we're now into 2015. We know that this was a function of our comprehensive plan updates for water and sewer, and to achieve a financially constrained comprehensive plan for Mr. Bond in 2016. So staff was directed to revise the water sewer financial gap analysis prior to proceeding with the utility rate and municipal code revisions that we're going to take on this year. And again, this is a function of the growth management compliance for 2016. So I guess with that, you've seen, I know Utility Committee has seen probably 4 or 5 iterations as we've worked through this. I believe Work Study, full council has seen this once before. And so this is the updated version. And there's been a lot of work, I have to say, in getting to this point. Katie probably knows more about our utility at this point than anybody from both a utility billing, operations, consumption standpoint. I mean, our utility has never been dissected as deeply as Katie has dissected this. So with that.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. It's good to be back here, and I will try to proceed, be respectful to your time, and proceed ahead with our... Tonight, we want to talk about the water sewer gap analysis and give you an update where we are. It's been a couple of months since I was back here for a work study, talk about the water gap and the sewer gap, and then the next steps. And the next steps would be to move through the adoption of the code, changes to the city code, the water and sewer rates, and the ultimate goal of this is to have you have a compliant, financially compliant, balanced plan when you get to adopting your comprehensive plan. Oops. So tonight, I think Mark just kind of gave the overview, is it's been about a year ago that the council approved this water sewer gap analysis to proceed. I've spent the time doing analysis, working with your staff, asking for more, building pictures. We've been to Utility Committee 5 times overall. This is the 2nd time at the work study. So what we did first was to do the 6-year outlook, really understand the utility, do the 6-year outlook on rates, which I presented and discussed with you in December. And from that, you said go back and look at the detailed consumption analysis and come back with how we come back with a 6-year plan for us in terms of rates. So that's what we have here. Still to be determined would be one presentation at a rate hearing is what I'm planning if you're up for that.
And I need to interject here. So remember that also this year we're updating our water and sewer, storm, and transportation comprehensive plan. And so there was an overlap or a coordination between those activities and what Katie's doing, in that your first step was to, or our first step was to have these utility plans updated, the capital programs reinvestigated, confirming that they are still capital programs, shifting them on our timelines, moving some projects out to 20 years, finding if there was a project that was captured both in operations. And so that work has all been done over the course of this process, is to make sure that this gap is based on the current and not some older version of a capital plan.
Yes, and through that effort, we've gone back and forth and been able to bring down the outlook in a good way. So I want to talk first about the water gap. And what we're looking at now is an increase of $7 per bi-monthly bill in each of the 5 years that we're looking forward. And this would be on the base rate. So your current base rate is $46.50 for 2 months. And what I'm looking at is $7 increase going up each year. Of course, your average single-family customer uses 7,000 gallons, and so that would be going up about $8 a month on that. What's different about this proposal than your previous ordinance increased just the base rate on the smaller medium meter sizes. It went up by the same. And what I'm proposing is that your water usage rates and your larger meter sizes all go up at relative to the single family, so that we're having shared pain equally representative throughout. So what are we talking about with the sewer? In a quick picture, the green, the blue across the bottom is your operating. Yes, water. Thank you. The green is your capital improvement plan. These are the well 10 and the projects you're doing that are funded by the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund loan, your DWSRF loan. And what happens is right here in 2018, starting in 2017, but this red is when you begin that repayment. So the goal is to get your rates moved up, as gently as possible, so that you will be able to afford those that debt repayment at that time. So what's in your water capital plan? The engineers had a 10-year CIP, capital improvement plan. Of that, we're looking at $9 million in the first 6 years. $6 million is this DWSRF loan, the well 10. And that project, again, is important to get the city independent in its water, and will allow you, once that is up and going, to not have to purchase water from the city of Bremerton. So that will be a cost savings when that gets up and done. In addition, we took only the highest priority projects in the 6-year window. That's about $3 million. And in order to do that, we pushed off about $3 million into years 7 to 10. And this was all to be sure that we could get the most important, by the engineering definition, to get done in those 10 years, and then to try to balance the rates. There were others that we pushed off well into the future, and one of them was, we understand that as some development may come in, the city may participate in oversizing, requiring larger lines to go in place, and the city would be a partner in that. And so we're proposing to put in, our budget is $45,000 a year, so that the city could have funds available to participate in those. And again, that's just to be sure that you're moving in the right direction and not be too overly generous, shall we say.
And quickly on that oversizing, so an example is a development that requires an extension of 500 feet. For their development, they need an 8-inch main. But if the system calls for a 12-inch main, then the city, we would be able to credit them for their capital costs, their capital facility charges, just up to the 8-inch. But the city would have to, in essence, pay that difference of us requiring the 12-inch from the 8-inch.
So that's, someday we get some of that back from whoever was.
Well, no, that's if it's a latecomer. This is a situation where we say, okay, we know that you only need an 8-inch main for your development, but we need a 12 for our system. So that additional 4 inches of main, we are going to pay that difference on that project cost.
Why would we require a 12 if their development only needs 8?
No, what I'm saying is if the development, let's say a big apartment complex went in and they just needed an 8 for their specific development, but the main extension into that basin, that area, service area, needed it to be a 12 so that we could meet the future demand
So
of the area.
eventually we could expand or extend that further.
Extend it or have more
additional development.
or to connect into it. We pay for the oversizing. We can't make them pay for additional main sizes that they don't need for their project.
I understand.
So that's why we're allocating an oversizing.
I think the oversizing generally comes in if you're trying to meet the comprehensive plan and everything's identified in there. And for their particular project, it's just smaller, so it's that difference.
So in essence, we would be paying money to be ready for the next development?
Right.
Or future developments.
Yeah, we wouldn't extend an 8-inch main into an area where our comprehensive plan designated at 12.
So this might be premature. Can you go back a slide, please? And I see a purple on the top that says add to reserves, and I don't see any color in the bar chart.
There is a teeny sliver right here in the first year.
So that's gonna go to my question where we just dealt with the decanting facility that was twice what we thought it was gonna be. Is there anything in this plan to build some reserves up so we don't get caught again short when we deal with water, whether it's sewer or fresh water? You thinking we're gonna have EPA issues or unanticipated costs or? And so I just didn't, maybe you're addressing that later. If you are, that's fine. You can answer it then. But I just didn't see where we're adding to reserves except for the 45,000 for the oversizing.
The way this plan is working, we are not adding specifically to reserves, just to build reserves. What we are trying to do is pay for the capital improvements that have been identified, as well as your operations and debt service. So we're not using additional reserves, and we're trying to maintain those so that you can pay for what has been identified you need to.
I think you're going to find the numbers that we're coming to at the end are not comfortable, and to add something on that to build reserves for future projects, I think when we get to future projects.
Yeah, I'm not concerned about future projects. I'm concerned about cost overruns or, you know, an engineer estimate now. When we go to build in 6 years, we just went through a 1-year process on a decanting facility that we thought was going to be $500,000, and it came in at $1 million. So, knowing this stuff happens all the time.
Fortunately, we're underway on the by far the largest. It represents 2/3 of our capital plan in the next 6 years. Is this one well that we're well underway on.
And the engineering estimates, again, they're estimates, but they're conservative, and they have contingencies based into each project. I mean, I think well 10 we have I think there's a $500,000 contingency. Obviously that's a $6 million project, but there are contingencies built into these numbers, and we have $1 million in reserve right now.
Yeah, I was trying to remember off the top of my head, but this does not tap into current reserves.
Okay, which is very little according to that purple. Can we go back to
There's actually, let me clarify, that purple sliver says that was extra money that the program received.
Okay.
That was not scheduled to be spent on operations.
What is the reserve amount now?
Doesn't
It's
just
about $1
Yeah,
million.
I'll have to look at it. It's fairly, you can sleep at night.
Okay. Can we go to the one that we were on before? Then my other question is that priority list, is that in the priority of the projects to be done?
Oh, from top to bottom?
Yeah.
No, I wouldn't say that's top. That's
No, I think these are in order of the type of projects that are that will be in your comprehensive plan, and the way the engineers look at it. And the way I think about it is we get the funding for these, we understand, we actually have them scheduled out by different years in priority so that they can go. And what this allows is if the rates were there and the revenue was there, then the city would be able to adjust the plan as necessary, to meet those. If something comes up and a grant is possible, you may want to move one project ahead of another, and that allows you the flexibility to do that.
right. The comprehensive plan is just similar to what's in your packet on the transportation. The actual projects are in a by-year category. We've just now taken that by-year category and kind of then lumped them into two main groupings.
We can get to that later, but it is in the back of the packet. This is so very small.
I can't read the slides, so.
Yeah.
I mentioned that the water sewer equipment reserve is $312,000 at the end of the year, and the ending unreserved fund balance for water and sewer together is $4.3 million.
Thank you.
And we're going to use some of that on probably finalizing the Well 9 project, but we're that's anticipated.
Thank you.
I have a quick question. Sorry to make you go back, but could you go 2 slides back? Is that a suggested increase every year, or is that what we're scheduled to do?
This is my
suggestion?
Yeah, my suggested, this is the preferred scenario. And, you know, when I run the model, it comes out with every year. And in fact, the water, there was a couple years that were lower, and then it goes steeper in the end. And I think that it's preferable in terms of rates to smooth that out. So I'm presenting you the smoothed scenario.
So that I understand this, where you have the average 2-month bill, that's just what the average bill would be.
Well, the base rate.
For water.
The base rate. For every account.
No, on the bottom,
On the bottom.
this average 2-month bill, so they pay the base rate plus 2,000 gallons extra, and it
So-
comes to, you know, a few.
Right, so the top is the base rate, and
Yes.
then what it's just to give us an idea of what someone's bill
Average-
probably would be.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
what the average residence
Yeah.
would be,
Okay.
the overall impact.
And I think it's also important, this is similar to the storm drainage gap analysis, in that this is a true gap analysis. In the past, when we did water and sewer rates, it was really just staff looking at operations and capital. And this is truly a more in-depth look at the utility in all facets to come up with an actual true gap. And there are two options at this point. We either go with these rates, or we take the project off the list. Unfortunately, that's really where we're at.
Or push them out further.
Or push them out further.
Okay.
But this list of projects has been identified by you and engineering staff or consultants, that these are things that we need to deal with in the next 6 to 10 years.
But, I mean, so remember that this year we're updating, so the first task of the water, sewer, storm, and transportation plan updates were to look at the capital. We had a meeting here with everybody and said, okay, we gotta get you guys going on your comprehensive plan updates, but we're also doing this project on the side concurrently, which is a gap, so we needed them to really look at the capital project first. And again, through the course, there's been a lot of, well, we don't have to do this year, we'll put this into 10 years out, and so I guess we've done that.
I would say there was also some that we identified that were on the engineering list that were already in your budget, so we were able to remove it so that we weren't double counting. We found some of that as well.
There was one that was like the step system on the sewer. It was in as a capital project, but we've already got that in our annual our operations type of budget, so that was able to come off.
So these projects and or costs are, if you put it conservative or worst case scenario, setting aside the inflation or the cost of something in reality. But then as you mentioned, there is this possibility between now and Project A getting started that there might be low interest loans or grant funding or something like that that would make a difference and possibly negate the need for increases in future years.
Right.
Yes.
And also in your numbers, you've put in inflators.
Yes, these numbers that I'm showing here will be out of your comp plan when it comes, or your water system plan. These were estimated by the engineers in 2014, so I call them 2014 dollars. But we know that there is construction cost escalation every year. So in my model, I've added 3% a year to try to put you on a path to not have cost overruns as much as is reasonable. We don't want to be too conservative and have it too high so that you're getting too much up front. So that 3% seemed like a reasonable escalation.
Based on what we know today.
Yes.
Who knows what regulations will change between now and then.
Fair enough. So then we talked about the rate structure. And the rate structure is how you get your money from your customers. Right now you have a base rate, and then you have water usage rate. And so on your, when I look at your rate structure and your bill, you're sending a message to your customers. And I like to look at it and make sure that that message is consistent with what your policies are and what's important, what you think is important. So now the policy drivers that I identified was you want to promote conservation, you want your customer bills to be reasonably predictable. If they use more, they're going to pay more. If they conserve, you know, we like it to go down a little. We want to be sure that they fund the utility needs. And then the two that we really looked at alternatives for was how much credit could there be for conservation, and what's the simplicity for working with the utility billing system. I like to look at the billing system and make sure that whatever you select for your rate structure works well with your billing system, is efficient for your staff, and it also is understandable by the customers, so you can reduce the number of calls that come in, and we can be as efficient as possible with your staff time and have savings for all.
Our current code for the utility billing staff is very cumbersome.
It's complex, and it would be great to simplify that. So right now, on your water usage, you have a number of tiers. For residential customers only, if you use from 0 to 3,000 gallons, you pay a discounted rate. It's discounted. As an aside, I talked to you the last time about potentially considering a low income or senior discount. What I found in doing this consumption analysis is that you have a discount already. It's much broader, and therefore I think it's good. Keep that. You're doing very well there. So in any user uses residential, uses up to 3,000 gallons, they get a discounted rate. It's about 34% discount.
We added that at the last rate increase.
Then over that, the standard residential is up to 5,000 gallons is included in their base rate. And then when you go over, you start paying water usage fees. It used to be from 5,000 to 30,000 gallons was the first tier. And then from 30,000 to 50,000, from 50,000 to 100, and so on and so forth. And there was this number of tiers were there, which is, you know, a number of tiers on the billing. So imagine someone calling up and saying, hey, how much am I going to pay for water? Well, they have to say, where do you fit? Okay? Now what we want to do is to increase the credit for conservation. About 2/3 of your water, it goes to residential customers. So if we're trying to promote conservation, we should be promoting it to the residential customers. And when the average is 7,000 gallons, if our first tier is 5,000 to 30,000 gallons, that, you know, it doesn't send the message. So taking this 5,000 to 30,000, I'm thinking we should go 5,000 to 10,000, 10,000 to 20,000, 20,000 to 30,000. And then above that, just have 30,000 to 50,000 and 50,000 over. What this does is keep the same number of tiers as you currently have operating in your billing system, and put the emphasis on the residential customers. So looking at what happens to the rates, this is a test year. So currently you're at, here's your base rates, 30.50 if you're up to 3,000 gallons, or 46.50 up to 5,000 gallons. And then you start going at $2.10 per thousand for 5,000 to 30,000, then $2.20, then $2.30, and so forth. It goes up by a dime. What I'm suggesting is that now we go 5,000 to 10,000 is $2.10, 10,000 to 20,000 is up a dime, 20,000 to 30,000 is up a dime, and so forth. And this would spread this out. This ends up that all of the would pay equal or more. And this is the concept that I am proposing. The actual dollars, it wouldn't be $2.10, $2.20, $2.30, because we would want it to go up relative to the $7 increase in the base rate. So that would be about 30 cents. So instead of $2.10, it would be $2.40, and so on and so forth. And I'm trying to get that relativity in there so that all customers are sharing that burden. In addition, the larger meters, we want to have those go up as well. The discounts we talked about, I think the discount you have is very broad, benefits all customers, and there's no changes recommended. So that's it for water. Then I'll go to sewer. So the sewer gap is wider than the water gap. And primarily that's because you had been foresightful and had stepped rate increases on the water side, but the sewer rate has been constant for some time. There is a flat rate for residents, and it's $98 for 2 months. And then what I'm proposing is that the smooth rate scenario would be going up $13 per 2-month bill for each year in our 5-year window. And so for residents, that would be the amount that it would go up. Again, I think it's important to do all other customers relative to that. On your commercial customers, you have about 20 customer classes. So it's a little bit complex. And when somebody calls up and says, you know, what is my rate going to be? There's a few questions that have to be asked, and there is an opportunity, I think, to simplify that.
Would it make more sense, at least on the commercial side, and maybe even on the residential side, to do a model more like Bremerton, where we measure the winter water consumption to measure what's going into the sewer, and base your sewer rate on what you're putting down the drain?
That is, some jurisdictions are going that way. In your instance, your costs for sewer treatment are based on an equivalent residential unit, ERU. That's how they're calculated. That's how you report to West Sound, and your agreement, both entities have agreed that that's the basis for that. So because your costs follow this per ERU, I think it's very reasonable for you to continue charging this. Certainly on the residential side. On commercial side, I think there's typically 2 ways. One is to identify the ERUs based on or projected use. The other would be to do the commercial on a base rate plus volume for higher use.
The commercial right now is very complex based on fixture count.
It is based on fixture count and some other measures that are related to an equivalent residential unit. So it comes down to, while it looks very complex, when I look at it, it really comes back to an ERU and what the definitions are of ERUs. And there's different ways of defining those and simplifying that in the code. So you could stay with that or go to base plus volume for the commercial. Yeah.
But isn't our ERU calculation based on water usage?
On your commercial?
On the sewer?
On the sewer.
On the sewer. The sewer, a residential unit is a residential unit.
I understand that.
Counts
but
one.
to calculate how many ERUs each jurisdiction has, it's based on water usage.
Yes, winter water, average winter water use.
Yeah. So we're kind of, in a way, at least for the cost of the operation.
Indirectly already.
So it's
In a roundabout way, done on.
yes.
Can you measure commercial volume?
It would be based on your metered water use.
So
And
you're
because
saying
you
everything
operate water, although your sewer service area is a little different than your water service area. If you were to do that, you would have to have the meter readings available. And there's ways of going about that.
Right, some jurisdictions use deduct meters, so they deduct out irrigation. Other jurisdictions take your winter use because they know your irrigation system should be shut off to try try to come up with that usage.
Yes. And you, I don't know that your system has deduct meters, but I see that there are irrigation meters. So there are quite a number of customers that have a separate meter just for irrigation, so you know that what's would be going in would not be irrigation water, and so would be used.
It's very commonplace in the commercial, not so much in the residential.
Correct. Correct. Okay. So let's talk about the sewer program. The operating expenses are going up because we're adding 50 new customers a month in the sewer side. On the water, we were only adding 20 new customers. We have make sure I got the right button here. This step conversion program. So you put in place back in 2012 a step system conversion program to convert 60 step systems per year over to gravity sewer. Grinders. Okay. And that is planned to go through 2021. So that's $380,000 a year. What we talked about in all of our discussions, and certainly with the utility committee, was not wanting to debt finance everything and get out here to the end and have no funds available to pay as you go. So what we have here is identifying this step conversion program. When we get out to the end of 2021, that money would be freed up for other capital improvements on a pay-as-you-go basis. What we have for the capital program, on the sewer side, there are 4 pump stations that are in need of rehabilitation. And the first one is Marina. Then we have 2 out at McCormick Woods, and then the Bay Street pump station. There are not funds available to do this, and the most cost-effective way to keep the rates down is to borrow and to go to Department of Ecology, State Revolving Fund, and borrow. And I'm assuming that you would be borrowing these over 20 years at 2.7% interest. They set their rates at 60% of the bond rate. 2 years ago, they were 2.7. Last year, they were 1.7. So we don't know what it will be, but that was a reasonable number to be using. So here, again, the sewer CIP, what we're showing. The comprehensive or sewer plan update is happening this year as pay-as-you-go. And the other, I have them color-coded into when the project would be happening and when you would borrow that money. When you borrow money from this source, and as well the drinking water SRF, your repayment depends on how much you actually borrow, and it comes in the year after the project is substantially complete. So we're making estimates about when that would be is included in all of this. But the bottom line is, again, this is like $7.6 million in 2014 dollars. And again, the model escalates these at 3% a year out to the year that we anticipate construction. So on the sewer rate structure, which we talked about, it's based on the ERU basis. That's how your costs are calculated. The current code needs some work to simplify it, particularly on the non-residential, the 20 classes. And that this is recommended to spend some time and go through and clean it up, simplify it, spend time with utility billing staff, and make sure you have a relatively new utility billing program, which is great. They're much more powerful than any of the others. And now everybody's getting used to what the possibilities are. So to be able to clean that up as well as your code would be very beneficial for the city going forward. I always like to show what comparable communities are paying, and these are your neighbors around Kitsap County. I've updated this from the December. This is for 2015 rates. And again, every community has to have a self-funded utility. So your costs and your number of customers all come into the equation. We can't set rates because we don't want to be at the top or we want to be at the bottom. You really have to fund your own program.
Right, these aren't based on, this is what's around us and we want to be in the middle. This is where we're at. And so this isn't, we're not basing our rates based on comparables. It's just.
Okay, and this is just sewer, that's not.
This is just sewer,
Okay.
and these are bi-monthly. And all this really is showing that, you know, Port Orchard at the moment is at the bottom. I did note that all of these communities it did increase their rates in 2015. Gig Harbor recently completed a rate study and they increased both water and sewer. Their sewer rates went up more than their water. On the water side then, and the scale is the same, so you can see that the sewer rates are much larger than the water rates, and that's consistently throughout Western Washington. And here on the water side, Port Orchard is somewhere in the middle. All the communities have increased water rates in 2015. You had an increase in the base rate. It was the last increase that was set in your previous ordinance. And so the next steps would be to move through adoption of water and sewer rates and to work on updating and simplifying the language in your code. And the result will be, for the first time, a financially constrained comprehensive plan, list of capital improvements, both in your water sewer plan, and that will be for your overall city plan for growth management.
So if we adopt these rates, but yet, is the code changes for simplifying it going to happen at the same time as the rates? Or will these simplifications in the code, particularly if we are looking at fixture counts and so on and so forth, and we want to base our commercial more on what's going down the drain, does that throw a wrench in the model?
I believe our anticipation was that these rates would go in at the beginning of 2016. And so there would be time, given direction, and I'll leave this up to Mark, but proper direction to be working on that throughout and how it can come together.
Simultaneous then, it sounds like.
It seems like, obviously working with utility billing and doing the code stuff, that will happen concurrent with the process. I think diverging into a commercial flow is going to be potentially problematic. Going away from the ERUs and trying to, that could potentially be
Would we end up in virtually the same place though? I mean, the idea is to fund the utility operation and these projects. So, you know, when you pull the string, the whole garment gathers. Do we basically end up though in the same place if we change the methodology? I mean, are you just shifting the cost from one place to another?
Ultimately, you have to end up with the same amount of money.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So I guess my question would be, what are we trying to fix in that process?
I guess it's simplification and parity. You know, that someone's not paying, in particular in the commercial side, if someone's putting much more effluent down the drain, customer A than customer B, but they have a whole bunch, this guy has more fixtures. It's just, our system just seems complex. And if we're gonna simplify it, I guess should be attempt then to make it, you know, more, I guess, fairer on the commercial side. And whether we've had any analysis of that or not, and I'm throwing you a curve, I know.
I have not gone through in detail to the sewer code to look at that yet. I understand there's a number of issues and types of customers that continue to talk to utility billing about that and have questions, but I have not gotten into the detail of that and what direction to go one way or the other.
Katie, this presentation that you gave us, like Jeff, I can't read this. Can that be emailed to our city email addresses so we can?
Yeah, we have. This was just something that we printed out in the format where you can take notes. We've got Brandy has this presentation.
Or give us magnifying glasses.
because I would like to look at it, and I'd like to look at the numbers and,
Yeah.
so.
And actually, there's this, but then there's also the other companion document that you have. No, that was just this.
That was this. I mean, you have the PowerPoint. I mean, I can do these in two per page, or I had them at 4 per page, and Mark thought you might like notes.
Yeah, well, Brandy's got this, so she can just.
But yes, you have, that's here in the city, and you have on email.
And I have it as well.
Is there going to be a separate analysis of connection fees?
Email it us.
Yes.
I'll email it just like that.
Do connection fees as well.
This is how they voted.
So the direction is to keep going.
That, I guess I'm waiting for questions.
So,
You know, this is always my ending that, you know, I'm all about sustainable utilities to make sure that, you know, it's up to us to protect the ratepayers' investment for future generations.
so to double check my math in my head, you're looking at $120 per year increase over 5 years. So a $600 increase on an annual basis for the average homeowner by the end of 2020.
To fund the projects
For the
that are
projects for both
identified.
sewer and water, is that right?
I haven't added up that number.
Well, it's
in my
13
head.
and 7.
13.7,
Yeah.
right, it's
Yeah.
$20 bi-monthly.
Yep.
So it's $10 a month.
$10 a month is 120 years times 5, that's $600. So that's what we're looking at for the average home resident.
600 over the fund increase.
600 per year increase at the end of the 5
Yes,
year period.
120 a year, $10 a month a year each year.
Not 600 a year.
No.
No, it'll be 600,
Over the 5 year
Cumulative.
period.
correct. But by the end of 5 years, the increase will total $600 a year more than the end of this year.
Yeah.
And because you were looking at loans, to fund these capital projects in sewer,
Mhm.
and you said those were 20-year loans.
Yes.
That $13 a month, or bi-monthly, covers those.
Yes. The debt service for those loans is included in here.
And then the step amount in 2022, or 7 years from now, is money available to us to do additional capital projects.
Correct.
Prevent potentially a future
Yeah.
increase,
Yeah.
hopefully.
Now, one thing we talked about before on the sewer side is the Marina Pump Station is the first pump station. The city has applied for a grant through FEMA, hazard mitigation. It was I don't know what they called it, pre-application process months ago, last year. And you were approved to go to the application, go to the next step. And that was supposed to be due in March. Well, before we got to March, FEMA said, let's extend that. Now they're extending it to June. So we don't know how much. The city applied for $4 million grant, and that would be FEMA pays so much and 75%. The state pays 12.5%. So it left the local match as a small percentage, and that was great. But when the pre-application, FEMA came back and said, we cannot afford to even consider you at $4 million. We need you to split that project up and take the seawall and put that separate and separate that from the pump station. So now your application will be going in for $1 million, not $4 million. So because the program continues to change and be pushed out, I have assumed that you are doing loans for the whole amount. So if you were to get that, it would reduce this. And the impact would be about $1 a month savings.
With the million.
Yes.
So that would be just for the seawall then?
Right. At this point, we're reducing our application to, it's like a geographic equity issue. They're not going to give the city, 70% of the funding. So we looked at the most critical component, and that's the seawall piece.
Well, that seems more logical for something that FEMA would deal with, is the seawall, because that's what would fail. And
Right. The coffer dam, I guess, is a better term.
Well, it was a good attempt to see if
Oh, I think it's a great
they
idea to
would,
try.
take the whole package.
I'm surprised that FEMA wants to upgrade our pump station.
Well, remember that we originally were approved for 3 projects through the Public Works Trust Fund. We had, I think we had 3 of the 6 for the well 10, and then we had 1.8 and 2.2 fully funded on the well 10, or on the Marina and the Bay Street, and then when the Public Works Trust Fund died, then
that was back when they had money.
right, and then the DWSRF, Drinking Water State Revolving Fund, came back and said, well, we can't do anything with the sewer because this is a drinking water issue, and we were able to rewrite the application for well 10 as a water quality grant application. We were fully funded on that. So, it was too bad for sewer, but a really good outcome for water, because we were only partially 50% funded originally through Public Works Trust Fund on well 10.
Well, we're a little bit, used a considerable amount of extra time on this one. So what do you need? What do you need?
So what direction? Timing? Come back with the ordinance?
Would you like us to sit down with as utility billing and look at some of these pieces on the ordinance side?
I think we know what the rate is what affects the simplification of the code, if it has any. I mean, we know what the end number is whether we're gonna make changes, I think maybe potentially in the code.
I wondered if, the utility committee has seen this 3 or 4 or 5, 10 times, but the rest of the council has not, so I don't know if that you mentioned wanting to be able to digest this, so.
Do we want to bring it back at a future, do you want us to meet with utility billing staff and kind of ferret out understand the consequences or issues, see how maybe even come up with a red line version and then having another work study conversation?
I would appreciate that. I think that's a really good approach, Mark, because the tier usage, I remember that was something that I thought we should look at. So thank you. That came out about where I thought it would initially. But I would like to have some input from others on unintended consequences. And I think that's a
I
good
believe
phrase.
there's an agenda item on our next utility committee meeting, not related to the rates, but the commercial structure and the complexity, and we have billing staff coming.
And then I think after that, we probably as a group, we're going to need to talk about seriously getting this on public record.
Well, that's the thing I was just going to raise, is if we could lay out a schedule for adequate public notice, and whether it's a formal public hearing or just an opportunity. I don't know what the schedule is for Bill, a segment of our city 1 month and the other segment the next month. It'd be nice if we could get notices out of a meeting in that building so people have plenty of an opportunity. Now, this is all proposed to be the rates starting January of 16, correct? So we need to know kind of a timeline backing up from that point as to when should we have some public meetings and
Well,
when do
and
we
it
have to
also
make a
sounds like
decision.
when we talk about code, we talk about city code, but we also think about programming code, and it sounds like we may have some issues within the actual
Yeah.
billing system that will
Good
take
point.
time.
Yeah, that shouldn't be a problem, the billing side of it. I think our bigger issue is all of what's gonna take us the most time is to go through those 20-some different rates and, kind of pinpoint some of the problems in that.
I would like to see, and I know this is probably a pretty complex project, but when the mailings go out for, potential rate increases, I don't know if it's gonna include their historical monthly usage, so they can see the new tier rates, and, because if they're at 7,000, it's gonna still be in the same range, but if they use 11, start the ball early for them to think, well, a way for me to offset some of this increase is to start reducing and get used to that lifestyle, maybe if I'm,
Is that on the billing?
I don't know if
think it
that's
is.
on there or not.
Yeah, there's usage chart.
The charge, but does it? Chart.
So I just think it's important to not only see the flat rate, base rate increases, but the changes or the potential changes to those, to those tiers.
Yeah, we hadn't given any thought of any communications to the customer yet, so that's a blank slate at this point.
Well, eventually we're gonna have to have notification, and that's just one of the elements I'd like to see.
Could our bill have a chart showing, I know the customer, Fred used 6,000 gallons and he's on this level, but then maybe there's a separate component to the bill that shows what the charge is per 1,000 gallons at the different tiers. So maybe that's going to generate more questions and more time to staff, but I'm trying to get people to understand it.
We did go to, as Mark points out, we outsourced our billing. So all we're providing is an electronic format to the billing agent who prints these and mails them for us. But if in fact you do want to get some kind of what I hear you wanting is an example. For example, if you're here today and there's a rate increase, this is what your rate would be.
I'm asking for potentially a chart in there that shows, it's part of your bill, that shows what the cost per.
With the tiers.
With the tiers on it, yeah.
But
So that you could look at it and say, well, I'm using 9,000 gallons, and if I got this down to here, I'd pay this rate.
It's not common at all to have that on the bill.
It isn't? Okay.
Typically, what I see is, a flyer gets mailed out.
Okay.
And it shows, here's what the tiers are, and here's some examples, and this is why we have the tiers here, and so on and so forth.
Okay.
And gets put in with the bills if they can be. I don't know if you can.
We would have to do those in a separate.
That's why a general flyer would be fine too.
Yeah, just what do you want, I guess, is what we need.
I just would like to be able to have people know what their current usage is and know what the new tiers are with the appropriate rates. And I think most people could figure out, say, $2.10 if I can get under the $10,000 or the 10,000 gallon threshold if I'm at 11.
So you're not talking about a generic flyer, you're talking about a specific for each person.
Well, if they have their usage, which you're telling me is on the bill, and then they have the proposed rates and the tiers.
I don't remember seeing it.
So a generic flyer
And
should
a
work.
generic flyer should work. It's much like, the electricity bill. I know my parents in California, when they go over X, it like triples because they, the brownouts and stuff, so. And they know that, they get that, they know, we can't run the air conditioner.
Hey, Jeff,
But I don't remember seeing
Nick
it.
had a good idea, because we outsource our bill, we don't even have to do like stuff anymore like we used to do. But you could put on the utility bill a link that says that we could create a utility billing calculator. You go to this website and then you can plug in your, if you're interested, you go to
That sure
That
is
would
for
work.
the engineer to do.
I wouldn't write the program. but I know
Well,
some-
I mean, you could do, like, you used to get on the bank statement, take this and fill in these blanks and it'll give you the number.
Yeah.
You could just build the blanks in there and they could take their bill and.
But I think trying to, for every account, 5,000 accounts, try to.
Yeah, that'd be hard.
Yeah.
I just don't recall ever seeing the usage on my utility bill.
On the water bill?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it's
Is
there.
it there?
Yeah.
It's there. What pains
Maybe we're
me,
billing you special.
Maybe.
what pains me about the bill though is that the cost of water is a very low component of the entire water portion of the utility bill. And it seems counterintuitive to me that we're increasing the base rate for everyone, which is not even based on consumption. It's like every $3,000 account is going to be increased by $7 a month. If you look at, what is the cost of $3,000? Is that $6.30? 3,000 gallons. Sorry. So it seems odd that, or not odd, but just counterintuitive that everyone's base rate is including. They're not getting any more water for that. Is there any way, or have they done it anywhere where they're actually charged more on consumption? Where
Yes, there are some jurisdictions that do that, have a very low base rate and have much higher water rate. And what I like a balance. What you give up if you go to that is there is far less predictability about the amount of revenue that comes into the system. And now that our goal on the water is to get the rates up so that we can afford that debt service on a reliable basis. It's
anti-consumer almost.
Well, the other thing, Fred, is the increase isn't going to the actual water, it's going to repair the infrastructure, which benefits everybody that gets the water.
We've ignored our infrastructure for years, unfortunately.
So you're not paying for the water that comes through the pipe, you're paying for the pipe.
We pay for both, but more for the pipe.
You would just think that we'd want to charge the people based on what they use, more than just.
Except you have the cost of getting it out to them.
Yeah, there has to be a base cost.
The well's $6 million.
Yeah.
We have to pay for it.
Before we start drawing any water out of it.
Whether you use a gallon or 100,000 gallons, well, still $6 million.
Yeah, the cost of delivery is, the long-term cost of delivery is really the key piece to running the utility. Getting it out of the water, getting it out of the well into the pipe. You drilled the well. It's the long-term cost of getting that water out.
An audience member that has their hand up, you want to recognize them for comment? Sure.
I guess I'm sitting here and I'm hearing that it just kind of got poo-pooed on the in and out. But I have a neighbor who has 2 apartments in an rural, and they have no, and I've brought this up many times, you're going to be charging him $1,800 a year because he's 3 ERUs. They do not have any washing facilities. The people are out of the home, so they go to the bathroom and take a shower maybe once a day. I bet that he uses less water at that place than any one of you sitting up there in their household. And yet he's going to be paying $1,800 a year more for those 3 ERUs. I find ERUs so unfair, and yet it sounds like you're built into this contract with whoever the West Sound and that, and you need to start thinking about a fair way, even if you have to increase the base a little. But we know that every one of you up there, because a survey was done a couple of years ago, other than Carolyn, are using more water than most of people that are being charged for many more ERUs. ERUs are not a fair way to tax your people. And it sounds like there's no way to get rid of these ERUs. And you can sit here and say this is that, but it's still a very unfair system.
ERUs are a basis for calculated the sewage bill. And this structure is the basis for calculating the water system.
I know, but it's still, you're basing the water system on ERUs.
No, water system.
No, water system is based on usage. That's why we've adjusted or proposed to adjust down, make those brackets smaller so that the people that use higher amounts of water are gonna pay proportionally a higher portion of the bill.
Right, water is based on a flat rate plus usage. Storm drainage utility is based on impervious surface units, 3,000 square feet per ISU. And then the storm drainage is based on ERU basis or a measurable
Not
ERU.
storm,
If it's
wastewater.
Yeah,
Wastewater.
Yeah. So there's actually three, in your utility bill, you have three different things happening,
But
unfortunately.
it's still the ERUs. Some places are assigned a higher ERU that are using or putting less in the system than most of you sitting up there, and they're being charged phenomenal amounts. If you had something like 80% of the water that you take in goes into the sewer system, and base it on something like that, and have your base rate, it's just, you are putting a phenomenal amount of cost to certain customers out there that are not using the services.
I think that should be an example that we look at when we're looking at the code and see how that works and see if there's any adjustments.
So at this point, I guess I'm hearing that we're gonna meet with utility billing. We may, I can't remember, we extended to 2015.
Yes.
So.
Or sometime in December, November, December.
Right, probably November 15th. So we'll meet with utility billing, start looking at the code. We obviously have the public hearing process, which we always go through. We'll have a couple of public hearings. They'll be noticed properly on the website and all that. Because we have utility billing limitations, we can look at the calculator, see if that's feasible. Maybe Corey or Deb can work something up and we can get something like that working. Do we come back to the next utility committee meeting, or do we just wait until we have, I think we wait until we have, it could be July before we come back to the utility committee. I mean, it's already, next meeting in June.
Yeah.
So it seems like it's probably July utility committee before we'd actually have all this stuff done and have something for utility committee, then come to a July work study.
I think we ought to come right back to the work study and, I mean, why come to the utility committee? This is something that everybody is gonna have to be a part of. I'd just bring it right back to another work study.
Okay, so we're looking at under the July work study to present what we have, and then we're going into the late summer, fall, the public hearings, and get everything in place for 2015 finally. Okay.
So maybe we set a meeting with utility billing and put a calendar together, so.
It might fit together faster.
Could the utility billing consider the cost of going to monthly billing at some time in the future, like maybe when the bill goes over 200 in a bi-monthly period, that it just go to monthly? I mean, would our billing costs double if we did?
We have budget billing now, so people can come in and pay monthly now. So we do have that capability, and we have a fair amount of people. Interestingly enough, most people all pay online in some format now, so.
I don't.
What would stop us from going to a monthly bill?
Well, your mailing cost doubles.
Reading meters.
Meter reading is the big one. How often you read meters, and whether you make some adjustment in the billing system to bill them for only half, or.
We've got 6,000 customers that we have broken into two pieces, and have two people that do those in those cycles. I think that would be challenging.
We have to hire more staff to read the meters more often.
Right.
Yeah, and for those people that want to pay monthly, and some do for budget purposes, they're able to do it.
Can they do it now?
Yeah, you can.
They just come in and set it up with you. Yeah.
So how do you do that? Do you project out what their bill's been for 12 months and then
Yeah, it's not an exact science, because when you come out at the end of the year, you might be off a little bit, so we have to adjust in December for the coming next year. So it is estimated, and then you have to adjust at the end of the year as you go over the budget cycle.
You just do a one-time makeup, or do you adjust the next year's budget with that increase?
We actually carry over a credit or a debit into the next year, so they don't actually see it. But we have to.
Future power model.
We have to adjust for it for the fiscal year.
Okay, everybody move on, transportation. Mr. Bond, update transportation impact fee.
I think I'm going to do first.
Are we going to do that?
Thanks, Katie.
I think so.
At least you're not stuck in Seattle out there. 35.
Better be on this side.
Okay, so transportation, again, back in 2014, October, we hired Transportation Solutions Incorporated, or TSI, and David Evans to start developing the transportation impact fee. And at this point, a reminder that a transportation impact fee is not the TIP. That's a transportation improvement plan. That's the transportation improvement plan is like a capital plan that then is used to create a transportation impact fee or a TIP. And a transportation impact fee is development paying for development, basically, and not a tax. Whereas a TBD or transportation benefit district could be considered more, just average citizenry. So I want to kind of, as a preamble, the TBD, a TIF, and the TIP are all distinct. So as you know, the transportation impact fee, we took the first cut of developing the impact fee. That was based on our 6-year transportation improvement plan. And we initially had a $3,822 per Institute of Transportation Engineering trip, which in the previous report there, we had that table in the back that said if you're in an apartment complex, your trip is 0.6, your value is 0.67 times the ITE trip. If you're a resident, it's 0.98. So the trip is an ITE trip, so that it is just a trip. It isn't like you're taking, because a lot of times people think your ADT average daily trip is like 6 trips per day, and they're on 6 times that number. It's not. Because your ITE trips are in the table of this transportation manual. And so we did that initial work in 2014, early 2015. We had an initial $3,822 impact fee. We then went back per your direction and split, completely changed our TIP, Transportation Improvement Plan, and we broke it into 3 tiers, where the first tier are our reasonably constrained priority projects that are part of our impact fee calculation. Tier 2 are completely unconstrained, but still the impact fees are included, or they are part of the impact fee calculation. And then tier 3 are the down the road wish list projects that are not part of the impact fee calculation.
So you said tier 2 is part of the calculation?
Yeah, and I don't think you mentioned, but the tier 1 is the same as the 6-year improvement program that you send to PSRC, and so that's the official list that goes to PSRC, and all of your projects that are federalized have to be on that list.
Right. And so we have that initial 3822. Then we split it, and we took some projects like the Tremont Phase 2 and moved it into Tier 3. And so we were able to get that value down to about 26. So we went from 38 to 26. And then we recently Nick and I meeting, this current project, because we've had a lot of activity in the SR 160 corridor between 16 and Bethel. And we've identified that the Bethel corridor is an improvement, is a priority for the city, but if you can't get to the Bethel corridor, then it makes no sense in doing that. So we've really identified, and I guess we've gone a little bit rogue as far as like other jurisdictions. We actually added to this tier 1, added to the tier 2, 2 projects that were on state highway systems. We've added 2 roundabouts, one at Bravo Terrace and one between Ramsey and Geiger, that are in the tier 2, so those are projects so that with development occurring in that corridor, we have the ability for a developer to construct that facility to get credit against the impact fee. So it's important to add those to this program. So we went from 38 down to 26, and I think currently, so we went from 3822 to 2606. With those 2 projects added in, we're up to 2708. So that's a very reasonable number. Having an incentive for a large developer, big box, to go in and actually construct those improvements. And then we also have in this presentation, we created an alternate, and at this point it's simply an alternate to the revised, which is to also take a look at, and it's in your packet, we added to the tier 2 a Sedgwick from basically 16 to Sydney, because that corridor in the future will be impacted. So that's an alternate. And if you chose to have staff go with the alternate, that would then move the 2708 to 2870. So we're still sub 3,000, we're still sub 2,900 on our proposed transportation impact fee, depending on whether you go with the current 3-tier tip or the alternate one that's presented. And I know I've bounced around all over the place, but
that alternate that we don't see, what's the cost on it?
You've got the alternate, it's in the map.
Is it tier 2 alternate 1 or tier 3?
It's alternate 1, tier 2.
And 2A and 2B.
I'm constrained.
Right.
Could we, if we chose to add that, how important, how realistic is it that we're going to build, this is a 6-year plan?
Tier 2 is 20-year plan.
Tier 2 is 20. Tier 1 is 6, so you're going 20. In fact, and these numbers aren't quite here. I'm going to have to make them. So right now, our current, the drawing that you, or the map that you have, or chart, is 2015, 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20. That's actually going to be 16, 17, through 21. I'm going to have to shift it a year because we already have the plan for this year. And then you'll go, so when you get into the tier 2, those are broken into 2 main categories.
It'll be 2022 to 2036.
2036. And so the Sedgwick project is a tier 2.
$3.1 million.
Yeah, 3.4 to basically widen that, in essence, a complete street, continuous turn lane. To get past Seaback Pizza and Lowe's and get all the way to Sedgwick, the drop lane, northbound Sydney. Because the intersection, other than the southwest and the northeast, already have right turn lanes. So this would, in essence, complete that. Because we have a lot of development between the proposed Stetson Heights at 300 units, and then quite a bit of activity recently between Sedgwick and Hovde, or Sedgwick and, I guess we'll just say Berry Lake on Sydney. We're going to see a major increase on demand, as well as the interchange itself, which we're working with the Department of Transportation on that. So I guess what you have before you and what we're looking at, or what we're requesting, is feedback and direction that basically, like I said, 3822, that number's gone, because that was based on an older impact transportation improvement plan. So we're really looking at, do we go with the 270843 per ITE trip? That includes the SR 160 improvements, which are vital, or do we add the alternate one? I think that's the direction we're looking at for requesting input, because our understanding is that from previous meetings is that council is very interested in moving these impact fees ahead. And again, an impact fee does not, the average current residents does not see an impact fee. An impact fee is basically a developer comes in, they're going to build a big box. That big box, based on traffic, has a demand on our system and our level of service. And the impact fee actually, for the most part, is a predictable number. Jurisdictions that don't have impact fees then end up with like an environmental review-based cost, which if a target decides to come into Port Orchard and they do their performing their due diligence, for them to choose Port Orchard over Gig Harbor, if they have a predictable number where they say, okay, we know that the impact fee is X, and we're going to pay that fee, knowing that that fee we will get credit back. Even if we have to build offsite improvements, we're going to get credit back for that. That's a predictable number, and that's the world development is used to being. It's much more. If you have to make a difference between coming into Port Orchard to Gig Harbor, and Port Orchard doesn't have impact fees, and you don't know what you're going to get until you go through an environmental process, hire an engineer, and do all this stuff, that's not predictable. You may end up with twice as much offsite cost because we've arbitrarily, based on traffic reports, that you need to now go fix this intersection, and that intersection. So coming from the development world, predictability is what's most important. And to have the city having impact fees in place is a benefit to developers, so that they have predictability and they'll be able to say, do we go to Port Orchard or do we go to Gig Harbor? They'll actually have a number that will drive their decision making. And so I think what we've developed over the last 6 months or so is much better than the improvement plans that we've had in the past. And I guess I feel good both from a wearing my jurisdictional hat and even my previous life hat. I think it's the direction we need to go when we need to implement as soon as possible.
No, I was just going to. I'm in favor of adding the alternates. I think that area has just been going loops and bounds, and the roads can't handle what's out there now. And we need more of an impact piece.
Well, I think probably what we need to do is get some feedback from the developers to find out what's going to happen with them. Maybe they won't develop here then. Is there going to be a hearing?
So the alternative, though, you have to realize that the city's at a point of concurrency. And so if we don't do something with our level of service, they won't be, so I guess they won't be developing because we won't be able to approve their concurrency, and then it'll be just like in Gig Harbor North, where you had Costco and you had YMCA, and you had all that development that was sitting there. They bought property, and they were basically, Gig Harbor had a big gate and said, you're not going anywhere. And so if we don't do this, our only alternative right now is a moratorium, is no concurrency.
And I think we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves, because the issue before us is by the end of June, we have to adopt the 6-year street plan and submit it to PSRC. And so right now, we're just trying to identify which tip we adopt. This is not adopting impact fees at this point in time. That's the second part of this discussion. But we need to know which list goes forward, because next week we have to do SEPA on the 6-year tip, and then we have to take it forward in the June meeting for council to pass a resolution saying this is our 2016 6-year tip.
But that is laying the groundwork. Once we approve that tip, we've laid the groundwork for when we do impact fees, what they will be based on.
But we do have to have.
So this is a 6-year tip, and it's a 20-year plan. 6 years from now, we're going to be updating this list.
Well, we update this every year.
Every year. Okay. So, I mean, we're seeing the growth along the Sedgwick corridor and Sydney and Sedgwick corridor. I think it's important to have these on here, but I'm not convinced that maybe we need to remove something else to keep. I'm not comfortable with the number of around $3,000 myself.
Well, and I was just going to ask the question. The challenge that we have is we need certain projects on here on the tip so that we potentially could get federal funding or some kind of grant funding to do it. Do we have to include those in our calculations for an impact fee?
If they're not, well, we could move, again, a developer isn't going to be able to get credit. That's why we added those 2 roundabouts. If their impact fees don't go towards an improvement that's on the plan, they have no way of getting a credit for the project. So the Glenmora development, which is coming off of Bravo Terrace, is a perfect example. If they will have the need to build that roundabout sooner than the city will ever have the need from a level of service standpoint. That project will be held up until they physically build that. If we don't have an impact fee in place with that project on our tip, they won't have the ability to get a credit, and subsequently they won't build it and they won't do the development. It'll be a moratorium by default.
Well, it's going to double the cost.
Can I interrupt for a second? Because I think what needs to be explained here is what happens is first you adopt the TIF.
Right.
You have to do that by July 1st of every year. But that's all your street projects, including the projects that are maintenance projects.
Right.
Okay, and projects that are maintenance and that are just to correct system deficiencies, those can't be the subject of an impact fee. Okay, so then when you adopt your impact fee ordinance, you have to adopt a project list, and that's a subset of what's on your tip, and they're all growth-related projects. So
Okay, that
it's
makes
not
it-
everything that's going to be on your tip. You're going to decide which ones are growth-related. That's your project list for that particular year. Then you impose the fee based upon that. And one thing you have to keep in mind is that you can keep impact fees for 10 years. And if you don't use them up in 10 years, you have to give them back. So that's something you're going to have to consider as to what projects you're going to put on there. Because if you're not going to build that within 10 years, it shouldn't be there. So then, at the end of the year, you do a calculation to find out how much you got in, how many projects you funded, and then the next year you come up with a different project list.
Well, as an example, if you look at the first page here of Tier 1, there's projects in here. The Arnold Creek Crossing, we talked about that particular project earlier on the stormwater. That's a project that theoretically will be done through loans or whatever in the stormwater system.
Yes.
Pedestrian path are 2 projects that, although I think are critical and important, I don't know that that's necessarily something that needs to be funded by a traffic impact fee. That's why I question, we need it on the tip for PSRC and grant related, but doesn't necessarily need to be, and you answered my question, doesn't need to be added into the calculation for an impact fee.
Right.
And it sounds like currently it is.
Well, this is just the TIP. This is just your.
If you remember back in November when Victor provided the initial traffic impact fee study report, it included all the projects that were attributed to growth, and that's what we're working on editing at this point in time. And so right now, I believe the proposal is to include tiers 1 and 2 in that study. However, if there are specific projects on this list that you want to instruct us to exclude from that study, we can absolutely do that without changing the tier structure here.
Well, the ones you do have to eliminate, though, are ones that correct system deficiencies, like this Arnold Creek crossing. That's not growth related, that's correcting a deficiency.
I mean, that and the pedestrian pathway, if we take those out of the tip calculation, and they need to be on the tip, but I don't believe they need to be as part of our impact fee.
Right.
And I see things on the tier 2 that I don't think we're going to get to in the next 10 years.
So and I wanted to address the 2 alternate projects because the reason that we have the alternate tonight is the discussions that Mark and I had. We're working concurrently on the concurrency and impact fee ordinance, and one of the difficulties that we're running into is that under the proposed concurrency ordinance, which needs to be adopted with the traffic impact fee ordinance, we have to ensure that we can't approve new development if the level of service drops below a level of service D, which is our current level of service standard. And so for the Sedgwick Avenue corridor between 16 and Sydney, that roadway is very close to failing from a traffic standpoint. And so we're going to come to the point where we can no longer approve projects there because that is not part of our traffic impact fee calculation, and those individuals don't have the ability to pay into that or to get credit should they build it to mitigate the impacts related to their project. And so that's the reason to include a project like that, is that we're potentially setting ourselves up to have to deny projects in the future.
I'm comfortable with what I'm seeing on a tip. I just want to make sure, because I'm calling, what Carol has said differs from what we've heard previously.
And that's new information.
That's new information to me too. I didn't know you could not have maintenance, and Victor didn't say that, didn't mention that, that we couldn't have preservation maintenance.
I can pull the statute right now.
No, I'm
yeah.
saying it's just new, so
Yeah.
I'm reacting to new information, so I think at this point, what we'll do is, we have to get our tip. So,
Well, if we take those two off, we're taking off almost $4 million.
but the tier, so for the PSRC, for the tip 6, we're looking at, that's just our tip, that's not the tip. So what I'm hearing is, we should go ahead and move ahead with just the tier 1, which is just a standalone project. That's for our funding purposes. But then we need to get together and take another cut at, based on this information, what our project list is for the TIF. And not try to combine them. Maybe we just need to get rid of this. We should just go back to the TIF and have a separate list and then identify which ones are.
And then, if you're gonna do that, should he include the Sedgwick alternate?
I don't think it would.
2A, 2B.
Yeah. I think it needs to be, I'd like to have it on our tip.
Because if we don't have it on the projects list, it's basically the type of moratorium on development.
That we're taking out.
Yeah, I mean, we have to have a TIF. The only issue I have with the improvement plan has changed so much. 3 years ago, PSRC, everybody had a big, massive single list, and they're like, no, you can't do that. The problem is that somebody comes in, and we only have the tier 1 that's on PSRC's list, and something else happens in an area that was really in tier 3, then, until we go and get that.
They're just going to have to build it, or we're going to have to deny it.
So tier 1 and tier 2 are projects that could potentially include interim impact. But not, what I'm hearing tonight though is, don't have to be. So we could pick and choose what we think are the things that we believe we're gonna get done in the next 10 years, because obviously we wanna build them, or we're collecting a fee that we may have to refund.
What's really important to me is, when I look at Port Orchard, and I just look, I look at a circle, starting on Bay Street, and you go up Bethel and across Sedgwick and down Pottery, Sydney, and back down to Bay Street. And we need, that's where our commercial growth is going to happen. And it's important to keep traffic flowing through there. And we know what the condition of Bethel is right now. And we know that it's not easy to take your car down there. We know that it's difficult for development to go down there because we don't have a good plan. It's just up in the air. We can't allow the same thing to happen to the Pottery Sydney Road. We cannot. And we started that in about 2009, 2010. We did an overall conceptual design. What I'm trying to get to is those two alternates between Sydney and 16 are important, and that corridor is important, and it needs to be on our 10 to 20 year. I mean, it just has to be. And when we look at the residential growth that we're going to take in, it's going to be on the west side of town. It's going to be west of 16. We're going to have simply infill on the east side of 16. So the other question I have is, because again, Bethel primarily and Sedgwick take a lot of traffic that's in the county. Is there any way to get money from the county to support these projects that are along Sedgwick?
And I think
Toll roads.
Well, you can enter into an interlocal agreement with the county so that they apply a portion or the whole city impact fee within a designated area, whether that's the UGA or a certain radius from a city boundary. But the county council would have to agree to that, and presumably there's a lot of county traffic being generated that is related to growth that's using city roads like Bethel and Sedgwick, and so it's absolutely appropriate to have them participate. Currently, if we find out about a project, we can write a letter and say, under SEPA or under the whatever project permit is being sought, we can say, hey, this has impacts on Port Orchard. We want you to look at what the impacts to these specific roadways are and mitigate them accordingly. And so with the Bayside plat from Bremerton, that's sort of the situation that we have, is they're paying a SEPA-based fee to the city for Anderson Hill Road. But anyway, so I think what I hear tonight is that Tier 1 as presented is fine for submitting the PSRC. So we just need to do SEPA on this and bring the resolution forward to adopt this. And then concurrently, we need to adopt the 3-tier plan, and we need to then have Victor update the traffic impact study and make sure that we vet with the attorney to make sure that it's only growth-related projects that are in there, potentially removing the crossing and the pedestrian path, and make sure that other projects aren't, that a share of that doesn't need to be adjusted. And so I think that we can do that. I was going to pass out these binders. What we've put together tonight, I've got one for each of the council members. Mayor, there's an extra one if you'd like. This is the traffic impact, or the impact fee ordinance and the concurrency ordinance that we've worked on with the city attorney. And so this document, essentially, we reviewed our existing codes. We have one of the worst concurrency ordinances, I think, that is around. We're required to have a concurrency ordinance by state law, and ours is pretty far from the mark in terms of.
Well, at least you have one. Some cities don't.
Yeah. So we're in concurrency in the traffic impact fee ordinance. There's a lot of cross-referencing between them. They share definitions, and so these 3 items need to move forward together. And so what I've done is I've put together this binder with the draft. There's one chapter that is definitions for both sections. The second chapter is impact fees, and it will include the appendices for the traffic fee, for the parks fee, and for the school fee. I haven't gotten a copy of the current school calculation yet, and so I'm going to meet with the school district between now and next work study. And then finally, there's the concurrency ordinance. And so in all, there's 60 or so pages in here. Do you have something? Okay, that we'd like to have you review, and if council wants to continue the discussion on these, my understanding was that you wanted to hear or see an impact fee ordinance come forward that could be considered, and so the proposal at this point would be to bring it forward in June, unless there's some reason to delay it. I also have a copy here tonight, and I see that Teresa is here, and I was going to send her this information today. I've already sent it to the school district, and we'll put it on the website, and any other organizations that you feel need to be notified, we can give them a good month before we even talk about it, much less bring it forward for action. The last thing I was going to say is that the traffic impact fee, you need to adopt a new impact fee ordinance regardless of whether you do traffic impact fees or not, because we currently have school and park fees, and we need to improve the ordinance from an operational standpoint. So that can go forward whether you adopt the traffic impact fee or not. You can't adopt a traffic impact fee until you amend the comprehensive plan to include all the projects that are on your 3-tier list in the rate study that Victor is preparing for us. And so we could make this ordinance, the traffic portion of it, effective upon amendment to the comprehensive plan. And so you could pass it sometime this summer, and it may not go in, the traffic portion may not go into effect until the end of the year once the comprehensive plan has been amended. And so, or you can delay adoption of the whole thing until the end of the year. I think that's.
I have a couple questions. questions, I guess, and a comment is I think we definitely need to make sure that folks have an opportunity to look at this and study it and comment. So I'm not in favor of it going to June. Second question is, there's an impact fee currently in place for the McCormick Woods area that was developed by the county and Gem 1 in particular. How would that be affected by whatever we were proposing to do here? Would that change? Would it remain in effect?
We've actually got a meeting scheduled with the county, number one, because there are city and county projects in the development agreement, and we need to figure things out with the county and then talk to Gem 1. But the ordinance that's been prepared includes a provision where they, if they pay SEPA-based fees for projects that are also in this TIP, they can apply for a credit.
Or we could amend the agreement and just say the agreement is no longer effective and they pay impact fees from that point on, or if they want to come up with a different fee. But it's really flexible given the fact that we have an agreement with them. Yep.
But that would have to be negotiated.
I think it's preferential to get rid of the agreement, but in the interim, if something is adopted, they have the opportunity to get it waived so that they don't pay any more than anyone else in the city by applying for a credit. And I think once we issue one credit for a house being built in McCormick Woods, we could simply just reissue the letter over and over again as those come in until the amendment or the agreement is amended, was the thinking.
So we've met
the next question or comment
in this current plan. We are currently including the remaining McCormick projects that were in that agreement as part of the TIP.
Right, and that's partly what generated. I was looking at the Clifton Road type and Anderson Hill Road improvements and things of that nature. And I lost my other comments.
I'm sorry.
I just wanted to point out with regard to the concurrency ordinance, the concurrency ordinance is the piece that says that if an application comes in and it causes the level of service to go down on a particular transportation facility that is identified in your comprehensive plan and it has a particular level of service, if the level of service is degraded as a result of that application, you have to deny the application unless they come up with certain transportation strategies that will address that level of service and either keep it at that level or increase it. That's a requirement of state law only for transportation facilities. The ordinance that you have not only addresses transportation, but also water and sewer. You don't have to have water and sewer. We can eliminate that if you want. But the reason it's in there is because it will prevent you from having to impose a moratorium when you get to the point where you're out of water and sewer. I understand you don't have that problem right now, but if it ever occurs in the future, you're going to be keeping track of your water and sewer by calculating the reservation, capacity, and it forces you to actually do the planning ahead of time so that you don't run into a situation where now we've got to adopt a moratorium and have a special meeting of the council.
The other comment I remembered was following on to her comments, Rob. In reviewing this list, I think it's important to look at it from a standpoint of, is it reasonable to assume we can get it completed in 10 years? Because I think, all good intentions, we would be driving on a new road on Fremont, but reality is it just didn't work. And same with Bethel. I see that there's some design work in here is one thing, but actually think that we're gonna, it'd be wonderful if we could get it done in 5 years, but unless there's a money tree in the backyard somewhere, I'm not sure.
Well, I want to point out that the problem that you identified, I've run into that before with a transportation impact fee where you have a project list and let's say you've got 10 projects on it, but you've got 30 projects on your TIP, and then the developer comes in and he actually needs to construct something that's not on your project list. You can amend your project list. You go back to the council and have them adopt the ordinance amending the project list because it's already on your comprehensive plan. Then you can say, okay, now we're going to give them a credit for constructing it.
Okay, well, I guess that's the key thing. So what I'm hearing right now is we're going to move ahead with the 6-year TIP 6, which is the PSRC-based funding mechanism. We're then going to keep the 3-tier with the alternate is the document that goes into the comprehensive plan element, which is our complete grab bag of everything. And then we'll create a completely independent TIF study
Project.
document that's just very, just a very simple list. Is it just a 10-year TIF with, we'll just pull off and say, okay, what can we do in 10 years? And we'll just start that as our starting point.
Project list.
Project list, yeah. Okay.
And we could adjust that, if I heard you correctly, whenever.
Right, if a developer comes in, he wants to construct it, and it's not on there, you can amend it, as long as it's on the comprehensive plan, and as long as it's growth related.
Which it would be if we were to do
Put
what
it on the tip.
Mark suggested, just what would be in the impact fee.
Okay.
So,
That's
I
a huge
heard,
difference.
I heard Councilmember Clausen say that he wanted more time to digest the ordinances, and I think that, I guess there's two issues. One is understanding what's in the concurrency ordinance and what's in the impact fee ordinance, and then there's the other issue of what's in the traffic impact fee study. And so 2 out of the 3 of those are ready to be discussed openly because they're complete and could be adopted tomorrow, although if we didn't want to do impact fees, you'd have to make some minor adjustments. So do you want to have a conversation on none of the items in June, or do you want to start the discussion, or?
I think I would like some feedback from the community on this. I'd like, I think, I mean, I just got this binder handed to me. I mean, if it's as straightforward as you're saying, we're probably ready for some dialogue, and maybe that's next work study, next month's work study, to have some dialogue, and maybe we're inviting, you know, the realtors and the home builders to that dialogue about this, and potentially you're reporting back to us with a revised number that for the impact fee and what that list looks like. So maybe we're seeing a draft list of projects and what that number looks like a month from now.
Okay.
Is that realistic?
Yeah, absolutely.
Is there a timing issue in your mind, Nick? I mean, if we delayed action on all 3
I
till
think,
July?
you know, there's maybe some risk management concerns in terms of,
I'm concerned that your concurrency ordinance doesn't work, and it says it's a concurrency ordinance, but it doesn't meet state law requirements, and you've been required to have that in place since 1995. And you're not using it, you're not actually implementing it.
Then another month shouldn't make any
No.
difference.
Well, I just wanted you to be aware of that.
Can we plan?
We could
for-
start discussing that.
Can we put 45 minutes or an hour for this item and make it our first item on our agenda next work study?
And I do want to point out that you are interested in that transportation benefit district, and once you adopt all those ordinances and you decide, if you do, that you want that $20 on the license fee tabs, it takes 6 months for it to actually be implemented. So.
Because we're gonna, and Alan's not here, but.
It's behind you.
Behind you.
Because we were going to discuss all of those funding options. And was that gonna happen in June?
I thought we were doing it tonight.
Well, I
brought it
did
along with
too.
me tonight.
Yeah, yeah.
No, I don't think we're gonna do TBE tonight. Well, we were gonna do TBE tonight, but it got full and it got
Okay.
overboard.
So maybe that's item number 2 next month.
Starting to sound like.
Aaron, we have another comment from the audience.
Okay.
Good evening, Council. I'm Teresa Osinski with the Home Builders. I just wanted to quickly say, one, I really appreciate this conversation. I think this has been really a worthwhile discussion, and I'm very encouraged by the back and forth and the thoughtfulness about the transportation impact fee. Secondarily, I just want to say I did have a chance, Mr. Lane here shared his copy of the draft ordinance with me, and I did read it very quickly. A couple things I think are worth mentioning today, as it could impact what staff brings to the discussion when you meet again. One is I'm concerned that the draft would suggest that the school districts collect the school impact fee themselves. I don't think statute authorizes that. Obviously, you have your attorney here. She certainly may disagree with me, but I have read the statutes and I don't see anything in any statute, nor am I familiar with that practice existing in any other jurisdiction. So I think that's at least worth review, and should be aware of that, and I look forward to what your staff comes up with regards to that. The other thing is that I am encouraged about this discussion and how that might affect what the final transportation impact fees could be. However, in the previous discussions on draft as well. There's no discussion for a deferral of that impact fee, whether it be transportation, parks, or schools. And while it's certainly always been an option in the jurisdiction, it is now going to be a mandate. The governor has signed the bill, it is now the law, and it will go in place in January. So I would encourage you to be forward thinking on that, develop your ordinance now to allow for that deferral so that you're not having to come back and recreate the wheel later. So that's just a few things to think about, since I think they could impact what you discuss in a couple of weeks. I'd encourage you to encourage staff to look into those issues. Thank you very much.
Please do.
If you want
Thank
a
you.
response tonight, or we can wait. You want a response tonight? Is that a yes?
I'm sorry?
Do you want a response tonight?
Do you have one?
Well, yeah, I'd just like to point out that I've had the same ordinance adopted in a number of jurisdictions, and some jurisdictions want to collect the school impact fee for the schools, others do not want to do that, and there's nothing in the statute that prohibits the city from adopting an ordinance saying that the developer goes to the school, pays the fee there, and then comes back to the city with the receipt in order to get the building permit.
That's how we're currently doing it, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
So,
We're not.
All right, we'll have that on the June agenda.
And we'll get the, see if we're going on the tips.
Second.
All right, Mr. Martin, number 5, capital improvement.
I believe, based on the time, I think we should adjourn this evening and bring this item back to our next work study.
Or just say yes, yes.
Yeah, just agree. Suspend the rules and agree that we'll do it. Whatever the flavor of the committee is, I'm going to go home and watch one of the last shows of David Letterman while I still can.
Move for adjournment.
Second discussion. Seeing none, all in favor?
Get up and leave.